Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Obi discovered that his wife had engaged in inappropriate behavior with a coworker during a work celebration. They are contemplating whether to reconcile or divorce, considering factors such as owning a house together, having 2 children, and financial concerns. The wife has expressed remorse, agreed to zero contact with the coworker, given access to her phone, and is willing to undergo counseling and a lie detector test. Now let's get into the story. So my wife and this guy have been coworkers and friends for over a year now. They mostly work together, but sometimes talk via text and Snapchat. He is 26 and she is 33. I'm 37. He lives in his parents' basement and has a part-time job at the company and no real financial future. He's also not very attractive and doesn't seem like my wife's type. Anyway, her boss at work had a birthday on Saturday, and I dropped her off at the bar where a bunch of other employees were going to celebrate. I fell asleep on the couch at around 1 a.m. and woke up at 6 a.m. the following day. I'm not sure why, but I had a bad feeling about her not coming home before I was awake. So I looked through her phone and found Snapchats, which made my heart sink. She messaged him at 2:30 a.m. and said he's asleep. After I found the texts, I took some photos and woke her up and confronted her. She came clean admitting to it all after I showed her the photos and said that they didn't have intimate because he was too drunk to get hard. But they fooled around and planned/tried to. She claimed this is the first time they ever got physical. But I am not sure I believe it since from the text they had clearly discussed it as they both knew what they were talking about. I am now trying to decide if I want to divorce or reconcile. I had an initial consultation with a lawyer today. We own a house together that neither of us can afford on our own and have 2 kids, ages 6 and 4. I'm looking for advice or support from this community. Do you think I can keep this relationship alive? She has agreed to go zero contact, give me full access to her phone and enter counseling. I also told her that she needed to inform her parents or I would, and she called them both immediately after. I'm not sure why I did this. I guess I wanted her to own it. And I wanted her parents, who I both respect very much, to know why I would be divorcing her if I choose that path. Update. So I'm relatively new to Reddit and have never made a post before this one, so I'm not sure if this is the proper way to update, but here goes. I read most of the comments here and thank you for your advice. I met with a lawyer yesterday and took home the client intake form, which I filled out in front of her short after I had my first consultation with the lawyer in 2 weeks as that was their earliest appointment. She has been very remorseful and has done everything I have asked of her so far. She also said she wanted to prove to me that this was a one-time mistake but didn't know how. Then I saw that some people suggested a lie detector test, so I brought that up to her. She agreed to take it and asked to do it sooner than later, so I called today on my lunch break and scheduled one for Friday. The questions will basically cover what happened the night in question, whether they have ever done anything previously to that, and whether or not there have been any other partners during our marriage. If she fails any questions on the test, I will not attempt reconciliation, and even if she passes them all, I still may not. This is all too fresh, and my emotions are too high to make any decisions at this point in time. The only decisions I've made are things she must do for me to even consider reconciliation. In terms of the AP, they work for the same company but do not work at the same store and have no day-to-day interactions at work. I am not making excuses for her and am not trying to diminish the disrespect she has given me or my family. Does anyone have any experience with lie detectors? I'm assuming I can't be the only person here who has had a spouse. Take one. Also, I do not wish to talk to her HR and make her lose her job if she has no wages. If we divorce, I do not want to have to pay support. Our incomes are slightly similar with mine being higher. And if some way in, hell, we do try to work it out I will also need her financial help to maintain the household. Today's second story. In this story, Opie discovered $3,000 missing from his bank account and returned home to find his 30-year-old wife had trashed their apartment, taken belongings, and left without explanation. Their relationship had a history of infidelity and financial struggles. The wife repeatedly left abruptly, engaging in secretive behavior and affairs. Now, let's get into the story. This is going to be a lot of text. I just need somewhere to process this. On Monday, April 5th, I, 31, male, was volunteering when I received a text from my bank that $3,000 had been taken out of our checking account. I rushed home to find that my wife, 30, female, had trashed our apartment, cherry-picked what items she wanted, and was gone. Texts and calls weren't going through, there was no note. A close friend of mine messaged her asking where she was, and she responded with, "You can tell my name, that I'm fine, and that I need some space, and that I'm sorry for hurting him." Since then, I've tried my absolute best to understand what the hell happened. Some background. My wife and I were together for almost 4 years. We were married on July 3rd, 2020. We met while she was working at a Lush in August 2017, and we were pretty much instantly infatuated with each other. We were definitely limericked. She had recently abandoned a 6-year-long relationship and was living with another guy, as she described. The old boyfriend was apparently an abusive alcoholic. She was also regularly cheating on him and had cultivated a relationship with a man who lived in Scotland. The Scotland guy was pretty clearly not interested in her, so when I came along, she eagerly abandoned both the guy she was living with and the guy in Scotland in favor of me. At the time, I told myself it made sense because I was offering more than anybody had offered in a while. I was desperately trying to build my life up at the time, so I was working full-time as well as completing a bachelor's degree. She came into the relationship with a lot of credit card debt and almost immediately financed a breast augmentation. So within the first 6 months, we had almost $20,000 in debt. This was new for me. We got along amazingly well despite it. The first couple of years of our relationship were difficult because of the debt and trying to establish permanence, but we persevered. There was abuse from both sides. We were open and only ever seemed to involve other women. We also loved each other very hard. I've had several relationships and I've never had one like this, where we were both so fervently in love and invested in one another, but also let ourselves get away with some pretty selfish behavior. She began studying for med school and taking on a lot of new obligations. She was a medical scribe for several years, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and we both regularly volunteered. On top of that, we traveled often, visiting her family as well as New York and Vietnam to work with disabled children in California several times. We both felt very in love and very empowered. We were very eager to be married and start having kids. We had so much fun together, it was mind-boggling. It's tough to condense 4 years into a Reddit post, but that's the gist of it. I learned a lot about her during the time we were together. She was extremely intelligent. She received a full-ride scholarship for the Midwest State University where she lived. After about a year of school, she started failing, lost the scholarship, and dropped out. At this point, she went to go live in a house full of men in Atlanta. She explained to me that she went because they said they'd take care of me. It didn't work out. Instead, she started camming. She paid the bills with camming and decided to move into a 1-bedroom apartment with a guy that she insists was not her boyfriend. When things started inevitably going south with him, she started conversing with another guy through a Poachman forum. He invited her to come to live with him, also stating that he'd take care of her. So she told the other guy she was leaving and then moved to Arizona. This is the boyfriend she cheated on constantly. He was 10 years her senior. During this relationship, she cultivated a relationship with that man in Scotland. She even went to see him while she was with her boyfriend. She and her boyfriend eventually moved to Washington. After he was laid off, she gave him an STD due to her affairs. One day, she packed a suitcase and moved in with, you guessed it, a guy that said he'd take care of her. The way she described their relationship was like an insect and a spider. This is where we meet. While she was working part-time at Lush, she told me she loved me. Within days, I did the same. I learned all I could about her almost immediately, including her tumultuous history. She very much acknowledged how foolish it all was. She seemed desperate for change, and so was I. I think that's part of the reason we got along so well and for so long. In February of last year, she secretly set up getting an apartment through a friend. I couldn't understand why, and we talked about it. Apparently, there were some things about our relationship she wasn't happy with. I had no idea. So we talked. She felt better and canceled plans. A couple of months later, she didn't want to show me her camera roll. Apparently, she had been talking to the Scotland guy again and had paid nearly $5,000 in credit cards to get a different apartment in Seattle. She was asking if she could visit him, but he said no. She'd been sending him nudes. We talked again. I couldn't understand what was happening. I started to realize how passive-aggressive she was, how well she hid things that bothered her, and that ultimately she had learned from her parents that when things get uncomfortable or tough, you talk to everyone, except your partner, and that you leave. Ultimately, she didn't make it to med school, so we lost that path we'd been working for. I'm desperately in love with her at this point, and looking at this like it's nothing we can't overcome if we both want to. She fervently agrees. We started therapy and got married. We seemed to be communicating well. Last August, I visited some family about an hour away from where we lived. When I got home, she was gone and left a poetic note that she typed on a typewriter about how all she ever wanted was to give me her whole heart, and that I said she needed to be protected and that this was her doing just that. We were planning to move in 2 days. I managed to get a hold of her through email and we met up. She apologized again and said she left because of how I reacted when she spilled chocolate milk, which was to snap at her to pull a blanket out of the puddle before she grabbed paper towels. At this point, I had developed some pretty severe trauma and PTSD surrounding her absconding. October 1st morning after we moved to a major city, I woke up around 9 a.m. to her standing over the bed. "I'm leaving," she said. I asked why and panicked. I literally never knew what to expect anymore. Apparently, it's the way I carry myself. I empathized and reiterated that I literally had no idea and was more than happy to do what I could. She clearly felt better, but at that point her friends were already outside waiting to pick her up. She took the train back home a couple of days later after shaving her head. About a month after that, I came home from volunteering and she was gone. $900 was taken out of the checking account. A note was on the table that she had gone to California. I called her and we talked. She said she just wanted a short break, that she was house sitting for a friend and would be back in a couple of weeks. I understood but explained this crossed a major boundary. Taking a vacation is fine, but you have to talk to me, right? I couldn't really accept that she had done this, so I gave her the choice between either coming back or staying gone. She came back. This is where things get different. She finally got a regular job working at a school as an assistant teacher, full-time with benefits. The first job like that she ever had. She seemed to love it. We were saving money. I had entered graduate school. We were living in a major city, and she started a new program to get a second bachelor's degree in 2 years in computer science. Months went by, and we seemed happy as could be. Except she started hiding things from me. Small things. Smoking weed, routes she'd take home from work, her feelings, you name it. I had grown accustomed to asking her, "Will you be here when I get back?" in fear of her disappearing again. I often had nightmares about it. On weekends, I'd wake up and call her name to make sure she responded. On weekdays, I'd look around to make sure she hadn't moved out in the middle of the night. I communicated my feelings. Often I went out of my way to do nice things or try to make her happy however I could think to do so. I had always sort of kept the house together, so I continued doing that and cooking meals. She'd get defensive but calmed down so long as I stuck to iMessages and stayed calm. It would always take about 45 minutes before she relaxed enough to talk about things. She started going to therapy one day. I asked if she was hiding anything from me, and she said no, which I knew was a lie because petty cash was missing. When I pushed her, she admitted she took it to buy joints that she smoked at work. All I said was I was tired of being lied to. She asked if we were meeting at the gym or not. I asked if that was her top priority. She asked again, and I responded with sociopath. she didn't come home. Around 10:30 p.m., she finally showed up. She was drunk and started packing a bag. I pleaded with her to talk to me. She asked me what I'd do if she didn't talk to me. I told her I'd be scared and sad. She told me your feelings aren't my responsibility and left. She texted me that this was a long time coming and that I'm not a sociopath. The next morning, I hadn't heard anything. I reached out to say I loved her, ask her plan, etc. She left me unseen. A couple of hours later, I reached out again. This time, I communicated that I felt abused. She told me she was moving back to her home state. I later learned that she was on the phone with the guy for 5 hours the previous night. That when she didn't come home, she had been on a call with him. She was on the phone with him constantly or texting, including being in bed next to me. She told me that she had already put in her 2 weeks at her job and she was just planning on disappearing without saying anything. We both cried a lot, I suppose rather foolishly. I again started doing what I could to make it work. After a couple of days, she told me she got her job back and had changed her mind, that she very much loved me and knew she had a good thing. I continued giving 150%. She seemed thrilled. She was more affectionate, reciprocating well and communicating. I kept it up. About 4 days before she left, we were using her phone to take a picture and I saw a nude I didn't get. It was the most recent photo she took. I immediately knew she was cheating. Again, I sat up, sighed and didn't say anything. Instead, she started the conversation. She apologized and explained it was a one-off thing and that she'd delete the number. I explained I was still committed and was going to see this through. She told me I was a great partner and that there was a lot she could learn from me, did a lot to reassure me everything was fine, from intimacy to gifts to words of affirmation. I was sad and betrayed, but gave in. It's sort of crazy to think that there's nothing I wouldn't do for her. The day she left, we made dinner plans and she asked me to pick her up some things from Costco. Instead, I came home and she was gone. All I had was that message, "I need some space." About a week later, "I want to talk, but I'm not ready. Also, you're not blocked on anything. I've had my phone on airplane mode. Sorry." I was reaching out a lot to try and understand what the hell was going on. I still have a ton of her stuff, and our bills were still debited from the account. A week after that, she coldly reached out to tell me she was finding herself. I'm finding myself, my name. I've been with a lot of people with trying to do that for me. So I took myself away so I can do it all by myself. Eventually, I checked phone records and the affair became obvious. I got on a plane to Indiana. Her family said they hadn't heard from her and didn't know where she was. She was Mia on social media and her phone had been off for a month at that point. Here I am, still so desperately in love. I started digging after the trip to Indiana and I found all the details. It's a guy. We used to joke about how hot he was. He lived in Leh. I asked my building manager if she saw my wife. She said she did and that she said she was going to Leh. Call it denial or confusion, but I couldn't comprehend this. We talked again, each time through Facebook Messenger. She apologized and said she wanted me in her life, but that she wanted to go it alone for a little while. I asked about the affair and it was radio silence. Her mom started messaging me. She told me my wife never planned on speaking to me again. So to go through her, which I absolutely would not do, suddenly she was active on social media again. She went to Vegas with the guy, bought lingerie, and took lots of sexy pictures. Got high nearly constantly. Daily. She was living with him in L.A. and sleeping on a mattress on the floor. She became insanely cruel, making Reddit posts saying I was abusive, and she regretted saying I do. Her unemployment checks started showing up in her old account before I closed it down. She refused to work with me in any aspect. It truly came full circle. It's the exact cycle she's been perpetuating ever since she left home. It feels stupid to say this, but I cannot believe it happened to me too. She described all of her prior partners as terrible people, and I believed her. I suppose she's doing the same with me now.